fact, this morning, for some reason, the link to this meeting was the one from the website, not the one that I was signing into. So that's why there was a snafu. So again, I should have followed the website. So now I'm going to continue with my sermon this morning. The Sunday after Easter typically includes this lesson from John's Gospel, in which Thomas expresses his doubt about Jesus having been raised from the dead. Since Thomas wasn't present when Christ first appeared to the rest of the disciples, he had been excluded from this experience. He had not seen what they had seen. So he either has to take their word for it or wait for his own experience of the risen Lord. And so Thomas chooses the latter. When Jesus does appear to Thomas, he meets Thomas's demands by showing his wounds, and then he lightly scolds Thomas for his lack of faith. Jesus says, "Blessed are those who have not seen and yet have come to believe." Now, I, for one, am a big fan of Thomas. Custom has labeled Thomas the doubter. But I don't think that's fair. Thomas is like a lot of us. He values evidence. He wants to experience things for himself. He wants to meet Jesus in person. He has to see in order to believe. So how are we, several thousand years after this tremendous event, able to experience Jesus? How, like Thomas, are we able to see so that we can believe? Or are we left to be a part of that group that Jesus declares are blessed because they have not seen and yet have come to believe? Faith in God and a relationship with Jesus did not come easy for me. I was a person like Thomas who wanted to see Jesus myself. These eyewitness accounts from 2,000 years ago were nice, but not very convincing, at least to me. I had a few friends who had some pretty amazing tales of salvation, which always seemed somewhat trumped up to me. One friend claimed they were about to drive off a cliff when a Bible laying on the seat of her car miraculously fell on the brake pedal and stopped it. Although it made a good story, I don't know of many cliffs to drive off in Richardson, Texas. Plus, I was always curious about what was wrong with her foot. But I digress. My point is that I think that the ability to doubt, the desire to ask questions and to explore the possibilities are an important part of faith formation. If I hadn't been given room to ask questions, to express doubts, to explore difficult questions, I don't think I'd be standing here this morning. Yet I am standing here today as a person of faith, as someone who believes because I have seen. But I'm also here because others had patience, who were willing to walk with me, were willing to allow me to express my doubts, who didn't pander to me or attempt to scare me. I can stand before you and preach the gospel because people loved me. They loved me into faith, which is what Jesus did. He didn't beat people into faith. He didn't get them to believe through trickery or emotional appeals. They believed because first they were loved. They believed because he lived what he taught. They believed because what he said bore the truth and was lived out in their experience. So where did I meet Jesus? Where did he appear to me? Well, my first experiences of Jesus were among God's people, witnessing acts of kindness and acts of mercy. Glimpses of the divine are often fleeting, but I began to experience Jesus in prayer and in the study of the scriptures. Mostly I experienced and continue to experience Jesus in the Eucharist. For me, the Eucharist is a place in which Christ is made fully present. I can't tell you why, but I know he is here at the table in the breaking of bread and in the sharing of the cup. In the bread and wine, Jesus is made manifest for me. Which why this time away from regular communion is difficult for me, and I assume it is difficult for many of you. A Twitter argument broke out this week on the possibilities of online communion. I do not have the theological chops to wade into all of the nuances of why or why not. The argument that is making the most sense to me is the one that comes down on the side of Jesus, or at least that's what those that argue this way say. They ask the questions: would he have withheld the bread and wine because the situation wasn't ordinary? Did Jesus break the rules of the established religious tradition when the situation demanded it? Now, I am an ordered person, and I follow the directives of my bishop. But I'm also beginning to question whether we ought to begin thinking in new ways and arguing for doing things differently. I know there are many ways to experience Jesus outside the Eucharist. But what I do know is that Holy Communion is a way I know that I am experiencing the living Christ. I do experience Jesus in other ways. In the smiles of strangers, in the care and love of my wife and family, in the hospitality of others, in the answers to prayers, in the little things done daily by many of you. I was reminded how during the teacher walkout a few years ago, it was right around this time of year, one of the teachers came up to me in Metcalf Hall, and with tears in his eyes, he said, "Thank you for being there for us and supporting us and making us feel like we are valued." And he gave me a huge bear hug. But this is how to be witnesses of the living Christ. By helping people in the midst of their struggles and self-doubts and desires to be valued. When you respond with a resounding witness of hospitality and care. When we open our doors and provide a space of non-judgment and undemanding. By sitting and listening, we become witnesses of the good news. It's as simple as that. Thomas wanted proof, and proof he received. The doubts of Thomas, we can be affirmed in our own doubts. Even one of the closest of Jesus' disciples demanded to experience the resurrection for himself. Doubt is a component of faith. One shouldn't be embarrassed about it. Doubt presents an opportunity to grow. Questioning gives an opportunity to know more. Doubt is a part of the journey of faith. Let us pray. O God, by whom the meek are guided in judgment, and light rises up in darkness for the godly, grant us in all our doubts and uncertainties the grace to ask what you would have us to do, that the spirit of wisdom may save us from all false choices, and that in your light we may see light, and in your straight path may not stumble. Through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen.